966.
This is the 966, Richard, episode 33. Well done, sir. Mumtaz.
Shukran. This is 33. We're just setting them up and knocking them down.
This week on the 966, we'll have another really awesome show today. We'll be talking about a new resort at Neom, the Saudi labor market, investment, and more. And also, after speaking with Bilal Saab last week, who talked about the military transformation ongoing in Saudi Arabia, we'll have the former head of the U.S. military training mission from 2019 to 2021, Colonel Brad Gandy, to react to that discussion and talk more about the U.S. Saudi defense relationship. Just incredible. Before we get started, Richard, we want to start off the program this week by wishing all of our viewers and listeners a blessed Ramadan, which starts on Friday for all followers of Islam. Ramadan Kareem to everyone out there. Let's get going. What's your one big thing this week?
One big thing. Today, March 31st, marks the end of the 6-month-long Expo 2020 hosted by Dubai. This Expo recorded over 22 million visits, featured 102 country pavilions, and presented 32,000 events and attractions. The Saudi pavilion was a leading attraction with 4.6 million visitors and won several design awards, including being given a platinum certificate by the U.S. Green Building Council, in part due to its 650 solar panels, all manufactured in Saudi Arabia. It also, and this is always important, it also won 3 Guinness World Records. One for longest interactive water curtain, 32 meters, one for the largest interactive light floor, and the largest interactive digital screen mirror, 1,240 square meters. You saw, I mean, that's a pretty cool building, the way it was cantilevered out, and the whole side was screens.
Cool. Yeah.
All in all, a very successful showcase for Dubai and a well-received entry for Saudi Arabia. As we have covered previously, while this Expo 2020 was going on, Saudi Arabia submitted a bid to host the Expo 2030 in Riyadh. Now that the current Expo is completed, the campaign to host the Expo 2030 has begun in earnest. This is because the Paris-based Bureau des Expositions, BIE, which decides these things, is expected to announce the winner in November 2023, so typically 7 years in advance. So basically just about a year and a half from now. Leading the charge for Saudi Arabia is the Royal Commission for Riyadh City, the RCRC. Fahad al-Rashid, CEO of the RCRC, said, millions of people, quote, millions of people who visited the award-winning Saudi pavilion got a glimpse of the future that the kingdom and its capital are building. Riyadh is building one of the world's largest public transport networks, one of the largest urban parks, a massive urban greening project, and turning the entire city into open art gallery without walls. I thought it was interesting, since Saudi Arabia applied just last October, the field has changed somewhat, because as you may recall, the 5 cities to apply for the Expo 2030 are Riyadh, Rome, Busan, South Korea, and Moscow and Odessa, Ukraine. So my guess, so just speculating here, given that the decision is going to have to be made by the end of 2023, it's difficult to imagine either Moscow or Odessa will be viable picks. Moscow politically, Odessa, oh my goodness. So that's sort of a third rail now, if they, for the BIE, if they want to go in that direction. So Italy actually hosted the Expo 2015, so just not too long ago. The iteration prior to this Dubai one in Milan, so perhaps that recency will work against Rome bid. So my uneducated and inexpert guess is that it comes down to South Korea and Saudi Arabia, and we'll know in a little over a year. I'm guessing South Korea will be very strong. But when I first mentioned this, I thought Saudi Arabia was a long shot. They were a late applicant. You had some other good things, good cities. But now, like I say, South Korea or Saudi Arabia, that's my tout. I mean, if you're a betting person, that's my advice.
I think it would be really, really awesome if they got it. They're also looking at possibly submitting a bid for the World Cup in the same year. Is that right?
They were going to co-host it with Egypt, yeah.
Okay, cool. So they got some balls up in the air. I mean, but 2030 is obviously would be a huge year for Saudi Arabia. It would really make up for a nice sort of, finishing of Vision 2030, even though Vision 2030 doesn't really end in 2030. Those dates sync up nicely.
It does. It'd be a coup. It'd be another showcase. It was a coup to get the G20 in 2020. This would be something. And they're already going through these transformations in Riyadh, very ambitious transformations, and what Fahad al-Rashid was talking about, they're going to attempt to do anyway. But yeah, it would be a big win.
And Riyadh is really changing a lot. I mean, it's obviously something we talk about literally every week, but all of these new neighborhoods, different, the Riyadh metro, ways of getting around. It's sort of a city on the rise. It seems like this would be really cool if they were able to get it. We're obviously a little biased. We're going to be rooting for them. But that is interesting. So you said that the date for that is about 18 months from now. They make the announcement.
Usually they do it late in the 7th year. So November, they're expecting in late 2023. So usually November. I should add that 3 of the last 5 Expo 2020, 3 of the last 5 World Expos have been in Asia. So 2005 in Japan, 2010 in China, 2025 upcoming. So not last 3 or so, the upcoming next one will be in Osaka. So maybe they're ready to move away from Asia, see if they come back to the Middle East, to Saudi. Again, that's if it's come down to South Korea and Saudi Arabia.
It seems like Dubai had a lot of success with their expo. And Richard, when we were there in 2012 or 2013, I think, they were advertising for it heavily, and it was like 7 years out. So, big deal.
That's a good pull, because that's a good memory. But yeah, I think there was a lot of impetus as Saudi was looking at this, because it's a good moneymaker. Mm-hmm. You got 22 million people coming in. 70% of that 22 million visits were domestic. So these are Emiratis. So imagine if you do that in Saudi Arabia, what the numbers you could get. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I definitely think the success of the Dubai Expo was incentive for the Saudis to go, hey, let's throw our hat in this ring.
Fascinating. Richard, my one big thing this week, we've obviously talked a lot about Neom, a good bit so far on this program. Last week, my one big thing was the potential for a massive Foxconn plant in the kingdom there. And we've also talked about how Neom is now one of the most sought after real estate plays in Saudi Arabia these days, according to Knight Frank. There's just a lot going on there. We haven't had a chance to talk about the latest announcement, and since many of our listeners and viewers follow Saudi even just a little bit, most have probably heard it by now. It's called Trojena, and I hope that I'm pronouncing it correctly. It is a vertical mountain village. And Richard, when this was announced in early March 2022, this year, just a few weeks ago, I saw the usual coverage for it, had a bit of deja vu with it. You just scroll through the headlines, you see certain words in all caps, a lot of sales going on with this, but this is actually really cool. It's essentially a vertical mountain village is what they're calling it, but it's a ski resort. It's like a town in the Saudi mountains. It'll have 6 distinctive development districts centered around tailored experiences that blend real with virtual architectural and engineering innovations, according to Neom, all to create a destination like no other on Earth. It's a year-round tourist destination, and for our viewers on YouTube, you'll see all the B-roll here. It just is an incredibly ambitious undertaking. You have the ski village, you have ultra luxury family and wellness resorts, wide range of retail stores and restaurants, sports activities. It's not just for skiing. It's in the summer there will be, mountain biking. And then of course, what you'll probably see on the screen right now is a just massive, looks like man-made lake that has that juts over a cliff. It's really, I can't even describe it. You just have to see it. Either look it up if you're an audio listener, or you'll see it here on YouTube. Interesting, though, that in winter, temperatures at Trojena do frequently drop below 0 degrees Celsius. It's about 2,600 meters above sea level. So outdoor skiing will be a really cool and unique feature of Trojena in Saudi Arabia. It is positioning itself to be the first GCC outdoor skiing destination. Kind of, Richard, looks like a little bit of a Saudi version of Lake Como or Switzerland. I don't know. It just, when you see this and you just see, it's another thing we do, and we talk about this a lot, but when we see stuff like this, you do have to just take a moment to actually take in what you're looking at. this is Saudi Arabia we're talking about, and yet these are skiers going through sort of man-made and natural mountain side areas, I guess. I don't know how to really describe it, but I thought this deserved some extra attention this week just because we hadn't covered it really. And this would be a unique, we talk about what attracts people to visit certain places around the world. And one of the things that, that I look for when I travel is something that's completely unique that you can get somewhere. And for Saudi Arabia, I mean, this is very, very unique. I don't know if you've seen much about this, but just thought this was interesting. And, we've talked a lot about Neom, but you got to see it. Pictures. Yeah. But it looks awesome.
The pictures, well, in that Daily Mail thing, it has a bunch of pictures, like 17 of them.
Mm-hmm. The Daily Mail, I should mention, sorry to interrupt you, but the Daily Mail is the perfect outlet to just give you all the art on this thing and just let you know all you need to know via images. But sorry to interrupt you, Richard.
Lots of all caps and bolds with the Daily Mail.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Always images. I have no words. It's just, you asked me what it reminded me of. It reminds me of Asgard, where Thor's home. These mock-ups are just astounding. Just astounding. And my inclination. I'm always pulled to the practical. But this is ambitious in the extreme and would be an amazing thing. But the architectural, I look at some of this stuff and wonder if the architectural capability and construction capability is even there. But it's like I said, some of these mock-ups and remind me of Asgard. Skiing would be amazing in Saudi.
I think that'd be cool. Adam Szyminski, when he was on, the former president of Capstark, when he was on with us, he was talking a little bit about how while there isn't skiing in Saudi Arabia, they are building that big mall of Riyadh, I think, that will have indoor skiing. But there are mountains in Saudi Arabia that, if there were snow, that you could ski on them. And I think this is, I think this fits the bill. But
it looks like some of these mock-ups, again, these are just mock-ups, but it looks like sort of Zaha Hadid worked with someone with a glitter machine. Mm-hmm. There's no right angles. Everything's curved. Everything's and I shouldn't say that. She has passed, so rest in peace. But it just evokes lots of curves and nothing, no right angles. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
It's also, and we don't need to dwell on it too long, but one thing that I would like to say about this, and again, this is a theme that we've hit on, but if you were to imagine this being announced 5 years ago, people would laugh at it, frankly. They'd say it's so ridiculous and so over the top. And I think a lot of people had that reaction in Neom when it was announced. Just said $500 billion, like that's a lot of money, and this is so ambitious. And now it sort of seems like this is not that outlandish for them to have this concept. The delivery date for this is 2026. That's 4 years from now. So we'll know quickly how this is shaping up. But And one more thing, Neom and all of these developments around Neom are all emphasizing sustainable development, blending man-made developments with nature. Just very, very cool. And again, check this out. You can check it out on our website. You'll see some B-roll if you're watching this on YouTube, but the images are astounding, really.
Part of it, even regardless of what happens there, and this would be a huge project, and let's face it. I mean, like the Red Sea development, that's taking time, and that's a very large project. There's a bit of sculpting going on in terms of landscape and geology, but these things take time. So I wouldn't expect this in 2026. But it is interesting when you when you see these images of Neom, and the mountain to the sea, because these mountains are really, it reminds me a little bit of Oman in some ways. But then you have the sea, which apparently is just gorgeous too. So it's quite the setting. I don't see this happening in 3-4 years, but the mock-ups are extraordinary.
Amazing. Richard, enough fun. We've got a really, really great discussion coming up right now with Colonel Brad Gandy from USMTM. So let's get right to that. Richard, on last week's episode, we talked about the huge transformation going on in Saudi Arabia's defense and security sector with author Bilal Saab, who has a book coming out on the subject. In that book and in our conversation with Bilal, he also talked about the role of the United States military training mission, USMTM,
USMTM.
in that significant transformation. If you missed that conversation, check it out on our website, YouTube channel. One person who did not miss our talk on the Saudi military transformation and USMTM's role in it was the head of USMTM from 2019 to 2021, Colonel Brad Gandy, who agreed to join us today on the 966 to talk about it. Brad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
This is ideal, Brad. We wanted to, when we set up the 966, we wanted to create a platform that generates informed conversation about real topics in Saudi Arabia. And we wanted to attract expertise, and we've plugged in our network. But this is an ideal situation where we had an expert, someone who literally, is, the big part of the conversation with Bilal was the U.S. military training mission in Saudi Arabia, which is the heartbeat, ground zero of U.S. Saudi defense cooperation. And so we're honored and thrilled that you were listening, and then just delighted that you gave us a call. So this is a really bonus. Thanks so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. It's you guys do a lot of really cool stuff for the relationship, and so I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Brad's got one of the more impressive resumes out there. Before serving as head of USMTM in Saudi Arabia, he served as a senior U.S. defense official and defense attache to Yemen. He also served as U.S. Army attache to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia between 2006 and 2010. Brad, I think it makes sense to start by talking a little bit about what USMTM is, some history, and what roles it plays in the U.S. Saudi relationship.
So, USMTM has been around in one form or another, really in many ways since the 1950s. Although shortly after the Second World War, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia began to acquire things like old CH-47 Dakotas. A lot of people have seen pictures of the founder of Saudi Arabia, King Abdulaziz, flying around the kingdom in old CH-47 aircraft. Those were basically surplus World War II aircraft that were purchased sort of in the waning years of the war, and then afterwards. And those were some of the original aircraft owned by Saudi Arabia. There's even a famous story about Abdulaziz having a special chair installed in the middle of the fuselage, so that he could look around in all different directions as they flew over his kingdom. And so in many ways, it's striking. That little anecdote is striking because it shows how even in the earliest days of its founding, the Saudis were leveraging their defense partnerships to enable the royal family and the emerging governance structures of the kingdom to be able to do a better job of getting around and seeing what was going on. And that is something that continues to this day. In its current incarnation, USMTM has been around since 1977. And that's the date of sort of the latest set of governing accords in terms of the U.S. military training mission's presence in the kingdom and so on. And it is, in many ways, the largest security cooperation organization in the world, both in terms of personnel and in terms of scope of activity and certainly scale of activity. And it really became a large part of the defense partnership in the wake of the Gulf War in 1990. After that, the Saudis began to really invest heavily in their defense capabilities, purchasing, F-15 aircraft, purchasing all kinds of naval equipment from the United States and from other countries, and then also significant amounts of ground combat systems, tanks, artillery systems, radars. The list goes on as about as long and as extensive as you can make it. And so, in many ways, the job of USMTM has been to facilitate the foreign military sales process for the kingdom. Kind of real quick, what is foreign military sales, FMS? That is the government to government contracts process by which other countries, Saudi Arabia, many of our European allies, basically anybody around the world, works with the United States government to acquire U.S. military systems. This could be anything from M1 tanks to artillery systems to computer software. It's kind of the gamut. Kind of depends on what it is. The best example in the kingdom's case is the F-15 SA for Saudi Arabia program, which is the largest foreign military sales contract in the world, and it is delivering the F-15 SA fighter aircraft, and has been delivering over the years to the kingdom. And so basically, the way FMS works, just very quickly, is essentially countries rent, if you will, the United States military acquisition system. So Saudi Arabia pays into a trust fund, and then the U.S. defense acquisition system provides the military equipment. And not just for the kingdom, but for all our customers globally. The United States Department of Defense's policy is on, and it's been this way for decades, is we do what's called full package support. So we don't just provide an aircraft. We provide the training, not just how to operate it, but how to maintain it. And then we also do provide all the maintenance and technical support for that system is going to need over the lifetime of its utility in the particular country, in this case, Saudi Arabia. So and so that's what USMTM's been doing for certainly like I said, in its modern incarnation since 1977, and that is it's a big job. And it's an important one, and it's been doing it very well. I mean, roughly speaking, over the last, say, roughly 40 years, I mean, the scope of foreign military sales to the kingdom is right around $1 trillion. That's a lot of business, and more importantly, that's a lot of American jobs that have been sustained, in some cases created, over the years of the partnership, and it is and it's significant. So I'll kind of pause there and see what else is on your mind.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the FMS and the job creation. The other thing about the foreign military sales, and I think doing business with the U.S., is you referenced it, the service and the ongoing maintenance and training that comes in the context of the FMS relationship. Because I know in comparison to many other countries will just sort of drop the hardware off, say you paid for it. But there isn't the requisite training and maintenance, systems put in place. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. The list of the examples of other countries who sell their respective partners a naval destroyer with no engines, no communications, and no guns are legion. Yeah. I'll refrain from diming out particular offenders, but yeah, those examples are legion here, throughout the world. The United States does not do that, and for good reason. I mean, not only is it bad business, but it's bad for the partnerships and the alliances we have.
Right. So the maker of the F-15, McDonnell Douglas, right?
Yes.
So if they in essence are in an FMS context, they're contracting with the U.S. military. They're contracting with you, right?
Well, not with USMTM, but with the Department of Defense. So when I say the FMS process rents the the U.S. military acquisition, that's exactly what I mean. So the F-15 program office that provides the F-15 aircraft to the United States Air Force, also has a separate division that works the F-15 SA program.
Right. And just for context for our listeners, that when you say largest security cooperation organization in the world, you're talking that FMS, U.S. Saudi Arabia FMS sales activity, that's value in excess of 100 billion, correct?
Yeah, and that's been the case year in, year out over, for about 20 years. It's a big program.
Yeah, extraordinary. It must have been fascinating running it.
Yes, it was.
How many personnel?
It kind of depends, varies depending on the size of the case, or how many cases we have, and so on and so forth. But a shade over 200 people,
Yeah,
and
impressive.
that's big for a security cooperation organization. Most are manned somewhere, in the tens and twenties of people.
So, as we look at the arc of Saudi Arabia's purchases and the relationships via USMTM, in terms of the technical system-based defense equipment, basically the hardware that Saudi Arabia has, what's your assessments of their defense capabilities? There's always these rundowns of X number of fighter planes, X number of ships and tanks and that sort of thing. That doesn't necessarily speak to fighting capability, but I'd be interested in your assessment of where they are in terms of their military hardware.
Well, in terms of the purchases that they've made over, going back really to, the end of the Gulf War, and in 1991, and then subsequently, the Saudis have made, I think, some smart investments. A lot of airspace over the Arabian Peninsula that needs to be defended from, multiple bad actors. So systems like, the F-15 SA, the AWACS that the Saudis bought in the 80s, from the Reagan administration and so on. Those are smart. Those are very smart investments. Similarly, the Navy has not gone out and, the Saudis don't need aircraft carriers, but they do need destroyers. They do need ships capable of patrolling and maintaining a presence along the kingdom's littoral, which is in the Persian Gulf and along the Red Sea. Because the Saudis are constrained by three of the world's major global choke points. You have the Strait of Hormuz in the Arabian Gulf. You have the Bab el-Mandeb at the southern end of the Red Sea, and at the north end of the Red Sea, you have the Suez Canal. And so, littoral security matters to the kingdom. So they've made some smart investments there. And then their land forces. You have both. Now, to be very clear here, my focus was on the Ministry of Defense in terms of the Royal Saudi Land Forces, and that is USMTM's role. We didn't play a role with the Saudi Arabia National Guard. That's a separate program, separate ministry. But in terms of land combat power, the Saudis have a large and they've purchased and invested heavily in modern ground combat systems. The M1 Abrams tank. Modern U.S. howitzer systems, artillery systems, and so on and so forth. And then, long-standing partnerships with any number of wheeled vehicle manufacturers in the United States.
So the very fortunate road that brings us here to this conversation with you, Colonel Gandy, started actually with an article written by Bilal Saab, a defense expert, in which he was talking about resetting the Saudi relationship. And in it, he said, what's underway in Saudi Arabia and what is little known is a massive, profound military transformation. And one of that was really the motivation to get in touch with Bilal and have that conversation. One of the interesting things he said on the U.S. side, there was initial impetus to have defense management specialists from Washington come in and handle that relation, help with that transformation. What happened, and this is according to Bilal, but it was that the Saudis were more familiar with the USMTM relationship and those relationships. And so is it fair to say that in terms of U.S. participation in this military transformation, that it's of the Royal Land Forces, not the National Guard, as you point out, is being led by USMTM?
No. I mean, let me. I think there's a way to better characterize. And I think you have to go back and kind of start. How did Saudi military transformation come about? Where's it trying to go? How does the U.S. government play a role?
Yeah.
Because I think the thing, the bottom line is the United States Department of Defense is fully in support of what the Saudis are trying to do. There are, I think, kind of as in any large organization, there are some discussions about how to handle business better. But support for the Saudi transformation is across the U.S. Department of Defense. There is support for it, whether that's at DSCA or U.S. Central Command, or from a policy perspective within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. But so bearing that in mind, back in 2015, 2016, the Saudis began to realize that they needed to do better in their defense establishment. They knew that they had a lot of the really good systems, but they really decided they wanted to be a real partner with the United States in being an exporter of security and stability for the region. And so to that end, one of the things that they started to do was they're starting to transform how their military does business comprehensively. And it has resulted in the achievement of, and they're looking at this as a 10-year process to achieve. But they have already made substantial gains in what they're trying to do. For example, they have created now what's called the Assistant Ministry of Defense for Executive Affairs. That is a direct equivalency to the U.S. Department of Defense's Office of the Secretary of Defense. And so what that organization does is that provides the governance for strategy, policy, procurement, and administration that OSD provides for the uniformed services. Separately, they are reforming their joint staff, and then they seek to transform their armed services from the quasi-operational organizations that they are right now into force-generating organizations that are then man, train, equip, and then provide trained and ready forces to a unified command. And so really what they're doing is they are adopting the direct, acquire, generate, and operate model for force management that is common in the United States and most of our NATO allies. And so to that end, that's where they're headed. And that is, and in so doing, what they hope to achieve, and I think what they will achieve eventually is they're going to become in many ways, I think the security partner of choice for the United States in the region in terms of ensuring regional security and stability in what is, by anybody's definition, a pretty rough neighborhood.
Absolutely. And I want to come back. I like that, exporting security and stability. We can unpack that farther down the road in the conversation. So essentially, they're trying to remake, in essence, not only operational but the soldier ethic. I mean, they're trying to fundamentally transform the whole culture as well as the operational mode. Is that correct?
Well, so Saudi Arabia, and what most people don't realize is Saudi Arabia actually has a really long military history, going back to, I mean, if you look at the story of the founder of Saudi Arabia, Abdulaziz, um, roughly speaking, from about the beginning of the 20th century, and certainly from about the early aughts of the 1900s through the final battle against the Ikhwan in 1929 at the Battle of Sabilla. Abdulaziz was in personal combat for almost 20 years of his life, and oh, by the way, forging a kingdom while he did it. Um, and and it's interesting as if you look at the story of the founding of Saudi Arabia, particularly when the Saudis took over the Hejaz. One of the knocks against Arab militaries historically has been decentralized operations. What's fascinating about that story, about as the Saudis assumed rule over the Hejaz, Abdulaziz never personally conducted any of the major military operations that resulted in taking Mecca, taking Medina, taking Jeddah. Those were all done by subordinates of his, while he was busy running a kingdom, and and putting in place the structures appropriate to the kingdom of the time. And so, interestingly enough, it was in the campaigns to subdue the Ikhwan, the recalcitrant tribes at the time in the late 1920s, that you had the first episode of defense cooperation between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and a Western power. That was when the Royal Air Force, the British Royal Air Force, provided a small number of aircraft and pilots to support Abdulaziz's efforts against the Ikhwan. And there are famous paintings of the aircraft arriving in those early days, and that was the start of what we now call the modern Royal Saudi Air Force.
And that was a decisive assistance. That was very helpful to that effort. Yeah,
absolutely.
We've talked about Ibn Saud, King Abdulaziz, and his extraordinary career, and also his really astute political and military judgment. I've likened him as a Saudi George Washington, but in many ways he's more than that. All the way from that nighttime raid in January 1902 to take over Diriyah in the first place. As I see, he and his 40 of his best friends sort of riding across the desert at night. Then to as you say, that's 1902. 1929 was the Battle of Sabilla. So exactly, he was an extraordinary figure. So. And you give us a good sense of where they are, and when we talked earlier this week, Colonel Gandy, and anybody who's knowledgeable about Saudi Arabia, you emphasized again and again that this is going to take time.
Yep.
Who's the motivation behind this? Was there somebody who came in and said, okay, we've got to remake how we address our defense institutions?
Well, I think in many ways, it goes back to a lot of the decision making that was going on as Vision 2030 was being created. They also took a look at their defense sector, and although defense transformation is not, I guess, officially a part of Vision 2030, and some of that kind of depends on how you parse that a little bit. But it is certainly a corollary effort, and it envisions creating a modern professional military, that is capable of, first world standard joint and combined operations, and that allows the kingdom to be a part of international coalitions and to support efforts at ensuring regional, even global peace and stability. And so that's where they want to get their forces to. And so that is precisely why, they're putting in and creating and then, and putting in things like, the Assistant Ministry of Defense for Executive Affairs, their version of OSD to provide that top level policy and acquisition and administrative governance. It's why the uniformed services are focusing and reforming into organizations much more akin to the functions that the U.S. Armed Service staffs provide to the U.S. military. And oh, by the way, most of the NATO allies and NATO member countries operate the same way. In terms of the service staffs, the Air Force, the land forces, the Navy, focusing on the manning, training, and equipping functions, and then providing those forces to a unified command that the Saudis call their Joint Forces Command, which then operates those forces as needed, and in support of whatever activity the kingdom has going on at the time.
So if Saudi Arabia, and I guess this is akin to exporting security and stability, the ability to do that. So if Saudi Arabia becomes proficient at this, can you elaborate a little bit on what that would mean for the U.S. as it approaches its security priorities in the region and elsewhere?
Oh, it absolutely 100% enables and the United States to, for lack of a better term, to basically be able to focus per our own national defense strategy against peer-to-peer competitors in Russia and China. It's really hard to focus on the Indo-Pacific or everything that's going on in Europe now with clearly in light of everything that's happened over the last month in Ukraine. Certainly a revanchist Russia that is absolutely not interested in being a contributor to peace and security in the global order. It's really hard to focus on those two significant peer or near peer threats and competition if you're also at the same time constantly having problems in an area of the world that has that contains in arguably the bulk of the known fossil fuel resources for energy, and you keep getting sucked in to to incidents in the Middle East. If the Saudis are able to be that partner and essentially become the nation that shoulders the bulk of, if you will, the ensuring peace and stability, not just in the Arabian Peninsula, but the Middle East region writ large, then all of a sudden, that is something the United States doesn't have to worry about in the same way it did 10, 20, 30 years ago. You have examples of where, the Carter Doctrine said, the United States will treat any move by any foreign power to threaten energy, the free flow of energy resources out of the Persian Gulf as a threat to, a significant strategic threat to the United States interests. Well, if we have a partner, in this case, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that can essentially do that on their own, then that is all to the good for the United States.
It's fascinating because you put a finger on this. Is 2015, 2016 when this thinking began and this transformation was started. It coincides a little bit, as you know, the Saudis are somewhat disenchanted with U.S. policy of late. I think starting with that October 2019 attack on Abqaiq, which there was no response to. Speaking of the Carter Doctrine, and then the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which many people in the region found unsettling. So it's interesting how they're already on this path internally it seems to be meeting up right now with a little bit of disenchantment with U.S. foreign policy towards the region.
Well, so first off, I would take issue that there was no response to the attacks on the oil fields. In fact,
is it fair to say from the Saudi perspective it was insufficient?
no, I don't. I wouldn't. I wouldn't care. I would not characterize that. When the first ever operational deployment of a U.S. THAAD battery to anywhere occurs, that's a significant step, and it's placed, precisely to help defend the kingdom against a clearly identified and ongoing threat from Iran. That being said, it also, I think, demonstrated that going forward, the kingdom, in order to achieve its stated goals, needs to be able to kind of do this thing on these sorts of activities on their own. So that, for example, one of the things that most people don't know, I think it is that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has purchased 7 THAAD batteries.
Is that right?
To give you an idea of the magnitude of that purchase, that's the same number that the United States Army has for operations worldwide.
Wow.
And when are those deliverable?
So, the initial case was signed in 2017. Because production lines had to be restarted. It wasn't like there were THAAD batteries sitting around off the shelf. By the end of the decade, those batteries and the crews, and the trained crews and everything to support them will be up and operating. And that will give Saudi Arabia the largest amount of concentrated anti-ballistic missile firepower of just about anybody in the world.
That's extraordinary. I didn't know that, and that's good to hear. But it also leads me to the next question. For example, Abqaiq, or what the Houthis are doing now, and when they're the asymmetric aspect of this, throwing in armed drones and cruise missiles, which I guess THAAD is not designed for.
Well, actually it is. I mean, you have the incident that just happened in the UAE where you had the UAE has 2 THAAD batteries. One of those systems shot down a Houthi ballistic missile recently.
And that's a ballistic missile, yeah. And so are we involved at all in steps to try and counter these asymmetric attacks?
Absolutely.
In other words,
yes.
Significantly below the level of a ballistic missile.
Absolutely. And I can tell you from my personal involvement in that process over 2 years, the Saudis have made enormous strides in being able to address those threats, and they have done remarkably successfully. I mean, personally, I'm sitting here, with all 10 fingers and all 10 toes, precisely because of Saudi air defense. Because I happen to have been in places that were on target lists, and thanks to the good efforts of the Royal Saudi Air Defense Force and the Royal Saudi Air Force, nothing happened. That's a good thing.
It is a good thing. So let me ask you a sort of off the reservation question, maybe not. What's your assessment of where the U.S. Saudi defense relationship is right now? And I say this because we see at the political sphere, this especially after Ukraine, relationships with Russia and China. We don't know, and they are dealing with China for missiles and that sort of thing. But what's your sense of the U.S. Saudi defense relationship, both now and as vis-a-vis and in comparison with previous time periods?
So there has always been a very strong mill-to-mill connection between the United States and Saudi Arabia, and that relationship has always remained strong in spite of disagreements over other issues. Going back to going back to, for example, the OPEC embargo, 1973. There were a lot. I mean, literally, oil tankers full of ink were expended on, on phrases like the oil weapon at the time. The partnership continued in spite, despite all that. And that remains true today. I mean, even when you had, a lot of angst at political levels during my entire time as the in the saddle, and oh, by the way, this is also true, kind of from the perspective of when I was the senior defense official for Yemen, but was coordinating with the Saudis on various things as well. It never impacted my ability to talk to any of my counterparts on various things, and that's a sign of the strength of the relationship and the importance of it, because circumstances are going to change over time vis-a-vis geopolitical issues, but what doesn't change, and I don't think is likely to change, is the commitment of lots of both the U.S. Department of Defense and certainly the Saudi Ministry of Defense in their understanding and belief in the importance of the bilateral security partnership.
I couldn't agree more. And as you say, that use of middle relationship goes back to the 50s, but even before that, that mill-to-mill relationship is a foundational backbone of the relationship, and that's not only because of the security aspect, but the interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
That have been built over time and are profound and very real, and they're the glue in many ways, beyond all the policy. So let's move back a little bit, because you've had an extraordinary career, and you mentioned Yemen. You've had key leadership roles in Kuwait, Iraq, Sudan, Tunisia, and Yemen. As you proudly recall, you grew up in Libya. You did,
yep.
So you're steeped in this region. And one of the things when you were attaché, a military attaché in 2006, 2010, you were involved with some of that battle against Al Qaeda in Saudi Arabia. Can you talk a little bit about the defeat of extremism in Saudi Arabia? Because I think that's little known in the U.S. how aggressive and violent and determined those attacks were, and that how had to be very terrifying for Saudi Arabia and citizens and government alike.
Oh, it was. I mean, when in the early days of that fight, a couple of years before I got to Saudi in 2006, you had tanker truck size improvised explosive devices taking out, entire neighborhoods in various compounds. Things were bad. When I got to the kingdom in 2006, I remember the horrible incident where a bunch of French citizens were killed while they were at a tourist site. They took a wrong turn on the wrong road, and were targeted and killed by Al Qaeda members out in the western part of the kingdom. There were lots and lots of people who were really uncertain about the future of, the relationship with the kingdom. That was in 2006. By 2010, they had defeated 100% an insurgency in their country. And they had done it without significant measures of popular repression. That's the remarkable thing about it. One of the things that I think most people are very unaware of is the Saudis made extraordinary efforts to enlist and ensure that the parents of young men, in particular, who got swept up in and seduced by some really sick, twisted individuals that belonged to Al Qaeda, to get the parents involved to make sure that they began to help these guys come back to the right, the right way of thinking and doing business, and conduct, and that proved to be largely successful. And and so when you see them achieve all this, and then I left in 2010, it was, I guess the best way to describe it is the immediate fight against Al Qaeda had been won. But it was unclear if the gains would be able to be sustained. So then when I came back 8 years later to take over my duties as the senior defense official for Yemen, I was completely blown away by all the progress and development that had been made. And I remember going to one of the new malls that had been built up on the north side of the city and walking through and realizing and seeing all the changes that were, part of the emerging efforts with Vision 2030, and realizing, what went through my head was, wow, we won. The good guys won. And that is 100% why the Vision 2030 is so important, and why, it matters so much, is because, assuming, the broad objectives of Vision 2030 are met, broadly defined as the kingdom replacing oil as the main pillar of its economy, being able to create industries in that within the kingdom that allow for the employment of the bulk of Saudi citizens, and can serve as an economic engine, not just for Saudi Arabia, but for the region writ large. What happens as a result of that is that it directly addresses the grievance basis that had fueled so much of the revolutionary ideologies that groups like Al Qaeda, the Iranians, and a lot of that ilk, broadly described as violent extremist organizations, because you got to throw ISIS in there as well, have been spouting for decades. And this is how you consign those sick, twisted ideologies to the ash heap of history.
Fascinating, because we talk about Vision 2030 all the time, and we talk about it as a social and economic transformation. And your angle is it's not only that, it's also security transformation, in essence, by
absolutely,
by removing potential recruits and all sorts of bad actors, not only by taking them out of play, but also reducing their attractiveness to the rest of the population.
And it's that latter point that is the key piece of it. Right. It's creating options and a future that cause the snake oil, if you will, that groups, that violent extremist, dead end organizations like Al Qaeda, ISIS, and all the rest of it offer as completely unattractive. Their potential pool of recruits looks at that and goes, yeah, no, this isn't working for what I want to do with my life, man. I've got better things to do.
So, and it's been fascinating talking with you both now and earlier in the week. And what so often happens when we do preliminary conversations, that's some great stuff that unfortunately we can't bring in here.
Wish we were recording, yeah.
Yeah.
It gets, this has been fantastic and content, and there's even better stuff. I mean, not better stuff, but there's equally good stuff that we'll leave on the cutting room floor. So, Colonel Gandy, you're an astute observer. You're right at the heart of this U.S. Saudi defense cooperation. Mm-hmm. You're seeing the fundamental changes. Why do you think it's not resonating, or is it resonating in Washington, D.C.?
I think it is where it matters. Various political factions and or actors in the U.S. are going to say whatever they're going to say, regardless of whatever reality on the ground happens to be. But I think where it matters, it is understood that change is occurring. Now, I would certainly wish that were more broadly understood, throughout the United States and throughout the world, because frankly, I think the Saudis have gotten a bad rap over the years, and that's unfortunate because the partnership really matters. And why do I say that? Well, on any given day, somewhere between 15 and 20% of the global shipping in the world goes through the Bab el-Mandeb, between Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, coming south out of the Red Sea and flowing into the Indian Ocean. Mm-hmm. That's the commercial value. The other value is that same passage strait, Suez, Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, Indian Ocean, is the United States Navy's back door to the South China Sea. So in the event of a crisis, Taiwan maybe, or something else, the fastest way for the U.S. Navy to support and reinforce its forces already in the Pacific is to move them from the Mediterranean. There's only one way to do that in a matter of days, as opposed to a 2.5-week sail around the southern tip of Africa. Mm-hmm. And that's Suez, Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, Gulf of Aden, Indian Ocean. Having a solid partner whose geography runs the bulk of that route matters. No ifs, no ands, no buts. It really matters. It matters for commerce. And in some ways, and especially as you look at the global transition towards renewable energy, in many ways, the Suez, Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb passage is, for the 21st century, as important as the Strait of Hormuz ever was in the 1980s.
In terms of global energy conversion?
Well, and yeah, in terms of the global economy,
right?
And by the way, it matters even more because the Saudis are now talking about building a massive hydrogen plant on the west coast, a hop, skip, and a jump from the southern entrance of Suez.
Right.
Those kind of developments, which, oh, by the way, hopefully, that becomes a game changer in the renewable energy industry, because I think the Saudis are going to leapfrog a whole bunch of players in that particular market because they can, because they don't have, among other things, legacy industries to hinder them in the creation of that kind of stuff.
Right. They're investing.
Yeah, exactly. And oh, by the way, they've got the cash to do it. Right. And so, it is for all those kinds of reasons why stability and security matter, and having a partner in the form of the kingdom that is capable of being a significant contributor in its own right to the maintaining security and stability in that part of the world, which is so critical for the global economy writ large, really matters. And so supporting them is critical. And I think that lesson is certainly understood. Where it counts within the U.S. government. I wish it was understood more broadly.
We have touched on it, but there's a lot going on right now about sort of like where the U.S. Saudi relationship stands. We've talked a little bit about that, and there's a question of whether or not Saudi Arabia should or could or would pump more oil in response to higher energy prices. And then there's also talk about we talked about it a little bit earlier today, just sort of like when there was a kind of palpable, like discernible change in the U.S. Saudi defense relationship that just seems like maybe 10, 15 years ago, if someone were to invade or attack Saudi Arabia, it would mean U.S. direct support for Saudi Arabia with boots on the ground. And that may not be the case now. Then we also talked a little bit about how, like in Washington, there isn't a strong. Maybe Saudi Arabia is a little bit underappreciated. In order to have a treaty with Saudi Arabia, we would need 2/3 of the Senate, which seems completely unlikely at this point. I guess my question is, how can the United States and Saudi Arabia enhance their military cooperation from here, if at all?
Well, so I think actually you heard the outgoing U.S. Central Command commander General McKenzie talk about that recently in some of his public statements about the importance of regional air and missile defense and supporting the development of that to where you have a truly integrated, regional air and missile defense coalition, and that is a goal. There is a entire GCC Defense Committee focused on that. But before I go any further, there's one thing you mentioned, and I think I'd like to kind of put a little bit of a contextual frame on that. So a lot of people talk about, well, in 1990, the U.S. sent 500,000 troops to the defense of Saudi Arabia. In 2019 and 2020, in the aftermath of the Abqaiq attack, it sent very small numbers. Well, you don't need 500,000 people to address an air defense mission. Was to stop an entire Iraqi army that had already overtaken one country, Kuwait, and was bearing down on the kingdom. So you send what's needed as opposed to what some pundits might say. Oh, well, you didn't send the same numbers. It's like, no, man, they're two completely different missions. And what is significant is that since then, certainly the Iran-based threats have not occurred. Now, there is a persistent problem out of Yemen. I mean, we just saw that with the attacks on Jeddah. That being said, what is equally remarkable is that you don't have significant loss of life associated with that. I mean, it's tragic that you have burning oil tanks, but the Saudis are doing a great job of defending 99% of their critical infrastructure. And it's kind of the challenge that they have is they have to be right 100% of the time. 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Right.
The Houthis, to be successful, just got to get one through. That's that's hard.
And it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
And they have done and I got to take my hat off to them. I mean, if you want to ask anybody who has fired the most Patriot missiles against an active enemy anywhere in the world, it is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Royal Saudi Air Defense Force.
Colonel Brad Gandy, head of the U.S. military training mission in Saudi Arabia from 2019 to 2021. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. This was an awesome discussion. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Colonel Gandy, what a treat. Thank you so much. I know you're on to your next challenge. I know we'll stay in touch, and hopefully we'll get you back on the 966. It's been really great to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. This has been a treat, and like I keep telling people, you guys are a force for good. So thanks for what you're doing, and keep at it.
Richard, that was an awesome conversation with Brad. Again, reminder, everybody, you can watch these conversations and all of these segments individually on YouTube. That we break them out from the larger podcasts. Just really great, Richard.
Yeah, it's a treat, and it's really educational, always educational, because not only did he add expertise, he threw in some different sort of perspective changes. and how we look at things. And what a great conversation, and extremely knowledgeable about this topic.
Let's get to Yallah.
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 Saudi in a minute. Riyadh Season 2021, the marquee festival, the Saudi Seasons program, closes today after a 5-month run begun on October 10th, 2021. It has welcomed over 15 million visitors to its 13 zones, spanning 5.4 million square meters. With the slogan, Imagine More, this Riyadh season included several concerts performed by the likes of Sean Paul, Pitbull, Amr Diab, and Muhammad Hamaki, among many others. According to Trade Arabia, it also hosted the kingdom's first cosplay event, attended by hundreds of Saudi nationals, residents, and visitors who dressed up as their favorite movie and cartoon characters.
Just amazing that the Riyadh season looked so fun and incredible. There are a couple really good Instagram handles that are just drone accounts of Riyadh or drone footage of Riyadh, and aerial shots of Riyadh season 2021, and also available on the SPA, actually, are just incredible. I mean, it looks really fun.
I didn't even notice this, but we talked on one big thing about the 6-month Expo 2020 in Dubai attracted 22 million visits. This 5-month Riyadh season had 15 million visits. That says something about the domestic audience, and also it says something about how people were really excited about this. And everyone we spoke to, every Saudi we've spoken to that came on this, had a story about this. How it was really a great event and a powerful draw.
Speaking of cosplay, I saw this and I was wondering if there would be a Comic-Con in Saudi Arabia this year. I can't find any information on it. It was held in 2020 virtually due to the pandemic. There will be another event, the Saudi Entertainment and Amusement Expo 2022. That'll take place in May 2022 in Riyadh. Increasingly, there doesn't seem to be really an off season for events in Saudi Arabia, but I bet Comic-Con has kind of been folded into that big expo for entertainment and amusement, but I don't know.
It may be. I mean, we really need to find the next opportunity for you to break out your Aquaman suit.
Yes. If everybody listening to this likes this, wherever they're listening to their podcast, I will wear my Aquaman suit and film this underwater. Yallah number 2, the second phase of Saudi Arabia's decision to localize professions in grocery stores and supermarkets came into force on Monday, according to a report in the Saudi Gazette. This phase aims to reduce the number of foreign staff in sales by half in the roles of department manager, deputy branch manager, and branch manager. As of 2021, the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development announced the localization of 20 professions and activities from a variety of sectors, as well as the establishment of nearly 378,000 employment openings.
We have, this is number 2 of our 6 Yallahs. Number 4 I'll foreshadow, is going to talk about the growth in employment in Saudi. This nitakat, the Saudiization process, is fascinating. There was a last year, 2021, there was a Boston University Y Analytics and Power for All study that looked at non-oil exporters in Saudi Arabia, and the conclusion is what you might expect. It says the result of nitakat in the near term and medium term sometimes is actually a reduction of efficiency. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense, because let's look at this. These are not exporters, but these are professions in grocery stores and supermarkets. I mean, essentially what you're saying is, right, you need to replace your lower paid, more experienced employees with higher paid, less experienced employees because they're Saudi. And the initial effect inevitably is going to be a loss of efficiency. But it's worth it in the long term. It's a situation, one step back and in exchange for 2 steps forward. To create these jobs, to create this work experience for young Saudis and old Saudis, any kind of Saudi. So it ends up being worth it in terms of the larger economy. And so I just think it's fascinating, the whole nitakat process as it's moved along and made these changes, adapted to businesses, gotten feedback from businesses, but stayed persistent in its goal to Saudi eyes. And as we can see, this is all turning into regulatory reform. These are jobs that are now mandated for Saudis, and they're doing this across sectors. And inevitably, it will result in more jobs for Saudis and fewer foreign laborers.
And that's the goal. I don't want to get too far ahead, but we will be talking about that soon. But that's this is very interesting. Nitikata is 10 years old now. Is that right? I think
that's right. 2011.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, 3, Saudi budget airline Flynas is in negotiation with both Boeing and its current supplier Airbus to buy aircraft worth $13 billion to $15 billion, according to a report in Reuters. The carrier has increased the number of planned new orders to 250 aircraft and also plans to increase the number of destinations from 70 to 165.
This is interesting. We haven't heard much more since the announcement that Saudi Arabia would launch a second national airline as part of a broader strategy to turn the kingdom into a global logistics hub. But anyway, this would be huge growth for Flynas. They currently have 20 A320neo aircraft, so this would be quite the expansion of their fleet. Flynas is, of course, the budget low-cost carrier in Saudi Arabia, but very interesting.
One of two. And it's interesting, too, when I see something like this, I sort of immediately check to see if it's owned by the PIF, Public Investment Fund. This is not. Flynas is an independent company. Apropos to the growth, it was just announced. It's interesting how quickly this happens, but just announced that this Future Aviation Forum will be held May 9th and 11th. And the Salah bin Nasser Al Jasser was the Minister of Transport and Logistics and also chairman of the board of GACA, with the civilian airline, General Authority for Civilian Airlines, said, to what's your question, he said, we plan that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will be a global aviation hub with investments of $100 billion by the year 2030 for the establishment of a new airport in Riyadh, in addition to 8 other airports distributed in the regions throughout the kingdom. This includes 4 airports in partnership with the private sector. That's a good thing. And the launch of a new national flag carrier to enhance the movement of air transport, while GACA's National Aviation Sector Strategy Vision aims to double the capacity and reach 330 million passengers from more than 250 destinations worldwide, and for air cargo to reach 4.5 million tons of goods. So anyway, in answer to your question, he just recently, the head of the GACA, said they're planning on a new national flag carrier.
And the aim of that is to really compete with Qatar and Emirates and maybe Singapore Airlines as being a global brand in international air travel. I mean, because they already have Saudia Airlines,
yes.
And so I think that is what is perplexing about it to me. But
it'll be interesting. I mean, there's certainly that's a crowded sector with a number of the Emirates, Etihad, as you say, with a big head start. Mm-hmm. But I think Saudi Arabia sees itself as a particular type, larger country, and anticipates maybe making Riyadh an international hub, and it's building a brand new airport. But yeah, that's a big investment in a crowded sector. So we'll see what happens.
And Richard, of course, we have nothing but good things to say about Saudia. That flight from Dulles to Riyadh is one of the smoothest flights that you can take.
It is comfortable.
It's very comfortable. Really cool that you can fly there direct. And
it's a good thing, since I don't drink when I fly. There's absolutely no inducement there, so that that's a nice healthy flight.
I do drink when I fly, so. But that's neither here nor there.
You emerge from this flight fresher than you normally would.
Indeed.
When we fly Saudia.
Indeed. Yallah number 4, FDI inflows totaled $19.3 billion, the most since 2010, according to data published by the Saudi Central Bank on Monday, according to Bloomberg. The bulk of last year's total FDI was from state oil company Saudi Aramco selling a $12.4 billion stake in an oil pipelines entity to investors led by EIG Global Energy Partners, LLC. A new national investment strategy last year set an FDI target of more than $100 billion annually by 2030.
Yeah, good year. I mean, even without the large chunk of it, was that that Aramco sale, asset sale. But even then, it's still their best year since 2010. Even outside that.
So basically $7 billion outside that deal. These big deals do count.
It's 2016. Though. Yeah, their best year since 2016.
Yeah. Progress in the right direction. That's the name of the game, really, FDI.
And the Ministry of Investment said that at the second half of 2021, they issued more than 3,300 new foreign investment licenses, a threefold increase from the same period in 2020. So they've got that $100 billion, foreign direct investment goal. This was a good year for it to move it along, and it looks like they're getting increasing activity.
Yeah, the folks at MISA, which is headed by Khalid Al-Fallah, His Excellency Khalid Al-Fallah, who used to run Aramco as Minister of Energy before this. They're busy. They're doing a lot of work here in the United States to drum up investment. They recently had a huge event in Riyadh. Obviously, just blanking right now on what it was, but
is that Catalyze Saudi?
Catalyze Saudi. Yep. Thank you. They're working hard to get this. I mean, they know how important it is. So those guys are hard at work. We know some of their guys in Washington. So
tell you what, our next guest is Amjad Ahmed, who's a venture capitalist and is doing some fascinating things with Empower Middle East, which is an Atlantic Council program. Lots of expertise, but I'll be interested in asking him about that Catalyze Saudi. So we'll learn. Stay tuned, listeners. You'll learn more about it in our next episode.
And if you hit subscribe, it'll just be delivered to wherever. Yeah,
that sounds like those old Batman episodes, doesn't it? Stay tuned, You'll see in the next episode. Robin and Catwoman. So anyway,
we are an audio medium, though. It's like we're kind of going back in time here a little bit. Exactly. A lot of our growth is on YouTube, but yeah, I mean,
but you should be hearing this part on a radio and over in mono area. I get mixed around. Is number 4? Is that the 490,000? So number 5, I guess.
I think this is number 6, right?
No, I think you skipped one.
Oh man, okay.
So the next one is all right. So I'll adjust. We're quick on our feet. So let me go back and do yours.
Thank you.
No worries. Since they're all ours, it hardly matters. About 499 Saudis entered the employment market in 2021, an average of 1,367 Saudis per day, according to an OCAS Saudi Gazette study of recently released government reports. The total number of male and female Saudi employees in the local labor market reached about 2.25 million in 2021, marking a just over 28% increase from 2020, when their number was about 1.7 million.
I did skip this one, and it's really funny because we just talked about not skipping it in the second one. But this is interesting. The labor market is hot in Saudi Arabia, in part because the economy is growing right now in the post-pandemic era very quickly. Some forecasts put GDP growth at 7.7% in 2022, after growing 3.3% in 2021. And these labor figures are from the fourth quarter of 2021. So we'll see what happens here soon with the start of 2022. But unemployment is down among nationals to 11%, the lowest since 2009. It's actually 22.5% for Saudi women and 5.2% among Saudi men. So there's some making up there that they need to do. But good trend, though, for Saudi Arabia right now in this sector.
Yeah, one interesting aspect of too in that fourth quarter 2021 that private sector added 250,000 jobs for non-Saudis. That had been going in the opposite direction as regulations and that sort of thing, and squeezing out non-Saudis. So that's an interesting. Obviously, a growing economy floats all boats. So this is a good sign if the demand for non-Saudis and Saudis is growing.
Definitely. Okay, so since I handed over my Yallah to you, just go ahead and wrap us up here with the 6th and last Yallah, if you would.
Absolutely. So the SBA announced on Wednesday that Saudi Arabia deposited $5 billion in Egypt's central bank as the Egyptian economy faces new economic pressures as a result of the war in Ukraine. On March 21, Egypt devalued its currency by around 14% after investors had pulled billions of dollars out of Egyptian treasury markets. Saudi Arabia said last October it had deposited $3 billion in Egypt's central bank and extended the term of another $2.3 billion in previous deposits. This new deposit would bring the total to $10.3 billion.
Yeah, it's really cool. We're seeing the global ripples of the war in Ukraine in our increasingly globalized world. Interesting topic here. Egypt is the world's largest importer of wheat, and 85% of its wheat comes from Russia or Ukraine. So when their currency was devalued on March 21st, Egyptians saw a 25% rise in the price of popular kinds of bread and some other food staples there. Interesting to note too as well, just wanted to add on, the Egyptian and Saudi governments signed an agreement on Wednesday to support and encourage investments in Egypt by the PIF, and this was according to an Egyptian cabinet statement. Saudi and Egypt had very strong ties, so it's not surprising to see Saudi Arabia supporting Egypt during this sort of pressure which is resulting from the situation in Ukraine.
It's a nice example of what Saudi Arabia is able to do. This is soft power. This is a stabilizing role in the region by backstopping a really significant ally at a critical time. It's the sort of thing that responsible nations do that are taking, looking at their neighborhood and wanting to encourage stability. It's also a humane thing to do because a lot of people are really struggling in Egypt in terms of food prices and ability to try and feed your family on your fixed income.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good step. It reminds me a little bit. We spoke with Colonel Gandy today about the benefits of Saudi military that is capable, as he put it, exporting security and stability, and that it's a good thing. This is an example, in a non-military way of exporting security and stability via financial means, and I think it's a good step by Saudi Arabia, strong step by Saudi Arabia.
Indeed, and just a reminder, if you've made it this far, you can watch all of these segments broken out on YouTube. If you want to just get to one thing or another, or you want to listen to one interview, or you want to go back and listen to an interview we had a few weeks ago, it's all there. It lives there forever. Unfortunately for my gaffes, they're just on there forever. But this was a really great episode. On behalf of both Richard and myself, Ramadan Kareem to everybody celebrating. And thank you so much for watching. Richard, thank you.
Lucian, thank you. Ramadan Kareem to all, and another good one. Thank you very much.
We will be back next week. Really great interview coming up with Amjad Ahmad. So, yeah, tune in next week. Thanks again, Richard.
All right. Thank you.